Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Drill Podcast. Happy Thursday to you. I'm Michael Rochman, that's Bailey Kumar, and we're talking about the running back position. When we think the first running back could come off the board, the free agency class that is filled to the brim with options of veterans and talented runners alike. Bailey, let's talk about this free agency class of running backs. Guys like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, all expected to hit the open market. What kind of impact do you think it could have on this league?
I mean, it's going to be massive. As much as people don't like to pretend, running backs are a pretty important position on an offense, and I don't think we've seen a free agency class this stacked in a long time with this many marquee top 10 running backs hitting the market at the exact same time. And it's very interesting that it kind of coincides with a kind of weaker running back class, especially at the top. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be kind of a musical chairs things where we see teams with pending free agents with pending running backs, bringing new guys, so on all around the league, and it's gonna be interesting to see which team is left out of that musical chairs.
Yeah, so let's kind of play musical chairs here real quick with some of the top names. Let's assume Josh Jacobs heads back to the Raiders with what he said about wanting to play for Antonio Pierce, but there's still a lot of guys that are on this market. We'll start out with the youngest and most talented guy probably. So that mixed combination is going to lead to Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Where do you think Barkley could end up in this NFL market that, probably isn't necessarily looking to pay him record-breaking money, but might be willing to pay him a long term deal that is going to get him some stability?
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw the report that the Giants didn't want to bring Barkley back. He's really the engine of their offense, so I don't know. If I'm a betting person, I think those reports are kind of smoke. I do think he ends up back in the Giants. But let's pretend like he doesn't. Let's pretend he goes somewhere else. I mean, there are a lot of teams that could use kind of a marquee running back. One of my favorite landing spots would be the Bears. I think they could really use a really strong running back to help Caleb Williams as he transitions into the NFL. And we could see a team even like the Cowboys scrounge together some dollars and make Barkley a pretty good offer to be their starting running back. They're in desperate need. Little spoiler, I don't think Pollard's going to end up back with the Cowboys after all this is said and done. So I think they'll definitely be in the market to find a new running back.
Yeah, I think you got the state right, but I'm going with the Houston Texans. I think that's a situation where you're able to spend money on a position like running back because you're paying rookie dollars to a quarterback. The wide receiver position has really kind of taken care of itself with Nico Collins and Tank Dell showing, great signs of life. Noah Brown even kind of showing that he can be the wide receiver 3 if you need to depend on him. So maybe they draft some guys, but I don't think that they're going to be necessarily looking to break the bank at the wide receiver spot. The offensive line is somewhat settled, so I think they have some money to spend. Obviously, part of that's going to go towards the defense, but I think if you have the chance at getting Saquon Barkley for maybe a 3-year deal where you're paying him around $13, $14 million a year, I think it's worth it to where you have that dependable runner. You get to further invest in your quarterback, giving him a reliable run game to depend on, and you're also getting someone that, you saw the impact that a guy like McCaffrey had with that San Francisco offense. I think Barkley could do something similar in Houston.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a great landing spot. There are a lot of teams that do not kind of have that marquee running back that would kind of hugely benefit, like the Panthers, for example. The Miles Sanders experiment was kind of a disaster that I think that, teams will be aggressive in trying to get more running backs. A running back situation that's kind of interesting is Tony Pollard, because he was obviously great in tandem with Ezekiel Elliott 2 years ago. Last year, he was given the reins of the offense, and he just didn't look up to it. I don't know what it was. I was really high on him coming into the year, and he kind of just disappointed. So if you're a team, you're looking at Tony Pollard, he proved, he didn't prove, but he didn't prove that he could be responsible for bell cow duties. So he may be somebody who is looking for a pretty big payday who won't get one and will be relegated kind of back into a tandem duty.
Yeah, I think he's going to be someone that is a little disappointed with the pay that he gets on this market, but I do think he's a little bit underrated when it comes to his value because, look, he got a big-time injury late in the season, and a lot of running backs take a year to kind of get that recovery and regain that explosion, and I think that's something that happened for him. So maybe he's not going to necessarily get back to the explosive Tony Pollard that was, kind of week in, week out, outperforming Zeke in that final year, but I do think that there is a lot of upside with him that maybe gets capitalized on because of the smaller dollar amount that he would get compared to some of the other bigger names on the market. And speaking of bigger names, Derrick Henry, veteran. You're a guy that roots for Tennessee, so it's probably a little bit heartbreaking to probably see him walk in this free agency period. But what type of landing spot do you expect from him? Do you think he's going to prioritize winning, or do you think someone's going to give him enough money to where he says, yeah, I just got to go here and spend out the rest of my days? And what type of impact do you think he can have on an offense?
Listen, after seeing A.J. Brown and Byard wearing other jerseys, Henry's going to be nothing. But in terms of fits, one that's going to be pretty obvious is with the Ravens, I think. There was a rumored team that was going to acquire him at the trade deadline and didn't at the last second. It's been highly hypothesized that's the Ravens. The Ravens obviously have a lot of pending FAs at running back, and I think that they could be a team that looks in to bring a Henry that can elevate a running game like that. I mean, the Ravens don't need any help in the running game. You saw that last year, but adding Henry makes it all the more insane.
Yeah, I think if I had to predict, I think that's where the Cowboys go is Derrick Henry. There was a lot of rumors about that trade, and I remember Greg Olsen talking during the podcast saying that the Cowboys were the team that was absolutely interested in Henry, and they had a lot of very close discussions to a trade getting done. I don't know if it was also the Ravens in that rumor or what, but it seems like the Cowboys were very interested. I do think that it's not just going to be Henry in that backfield. If they do sign him, I think they're going to go about trying to find someone to help complement him, whether that's through the draft or through some cheaper options. But I think Cowboys are going to prioritize him and let Tony Pollard walk. And where Pollard ends up, who knows? I mean, the issue for a market like this is that the running back position is somewhat getting filled around the league, and that's kind of resulted in some guys that are very talented almost having to be out of a job because they don't want the role that they would have been taking. Or, similar situations like Dalvin Cook, where he went to the Jets and didn't think he was going to be such a rotational piece of that backfield. But as you get older, it just sort of happens. Ezekiel Elliott didn't look like a guy that would be kind of getting maybe like 1 out of every 3 snaps, but now just a couple years later, he is the backup to Ramondre Stevenson in New England. Obviously, he's a free agent as well, but I think that that's part of the situation here where guys like Tony Pollard, guys like Devin Singletary, they're in a position where maybe they can come back to their team and keep their starting job, but if they hit the market and they don't end up back with their team quickly, they could find themselves in a less than ideal role.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other guys too, like DeAndre Swift, obviously started for the Eagles this year. He's not on contract. He's a free agent. The Eagles kind of maybe looked upgrade there. Austin Eckler, free agent. He kind of wanted that long-term extension with the Chargers. Didn't get it. He's a free agent. So those are 2 running backs who maybe, they weren't bad. I mean, Eckler was kind of bad, but they weren't like horrible by any means, but they just may be out of luck for a job. The running back is a brutal market. 1 down year and your career is done. So, I mean, it's very tough, like I said. And you're talking about Pollard landing spots. One of my probably favorite spots for him is with the Chargers and pairing him with a kind of heavier bruiser back from the draft.
Yeah, and speaking of the draft, this is a class that I think is a little bit underrated. It doesn't have the Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, or even necessarily like a Breece Hall, but I do think there are some valuable runners. First off the board, if you had to guess, like just in terms of draft position, not necessarily a name, just where you expect the first name to kind of be selected, what type of range are you expecting for this class?
The biggest question is going to be obviously around the Chargers at 37, especially with Harbaugh and this guy. I'm not sure that they go in that direction. I think they have too many holes on their roster to kind of not reach, but take a running back. You need some other spots to fill. But when you go to the back half of the second, there's a lot of interesting names. The one that pops out to me is the Eagles. I'm not sure if the Eagles are going to have the free agent dollars to go out and acquire a starting running back that's worth the money. They could bring back DeAndre Swift for kind of the same deal, but I think ideally they would like to have somebody else that they could rely on. After, not that Swift went down, but when Swift wasn't in, the running game was really inefficient. So I think they're definitely the spot to look for the first running back to be off the board.
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of sold on the fact that the Chargers probably look at this running back class and, Jim Harbaugh has plenty of experience with Corum. I think he's going to be all in on trying to get him there at 37. If that doesn't happen, if for some reason, it's not even for some reason. Like, it would make sense if they were to go in a different direction. But let's say it happens. I think 49 for Cincinnati makes a lot of sense, especially if Joe Mixon ends up getting cut. But even if he doesn't, I mean, a guy like Jonathan Brooks makes a lot of sense for Cincinnati, where maybe you have Joe Mixon kind of controlling the early year work. And then as the season goes on and as Jonathan Brooks gets healthier, I think it's a perfect pairing to where he kind of takes over for the postseason run that Cincinnati is expecting, assuming they're able to stay healthy this year. Again, Philadelphia makes a lot of sense. I think one of the interesting spots is with New York Giants. If Barkley does walk, are they going to potentially look to draft someone with maybe their second round pick? It's certainly something that needs to be discussed. Green Bay just spent a second round pick on A.J. Dillon when he was a rookie because they were like, how long is Aaron Jones going to last? Does that mean they're going to skip out on drafting someone now when A.J. Dillon's on the open market now? I mean, look, free agency is going to resolve some of these concerns for some of these teams and their running back future. But, I mean, it makes sense for a lot of these teams in the second round. And I think a lot of people are so quick when it's their team or just any team really in mock drafts to say, oh, they just need someone on day 3 that can contribute. And they just assume that every day 3 back is going to contribute. There is generally a day 3 back or 2 who contributes in a large role on an NFL team, but it's not every day 3 back that is that's capable of doing it. So that is one of the most common misconceptions when it comes to these mock drafts. So I think NFL teams are going to feel a lot more stable selecting someone in the earlier rounds and probably as early as the second. And I think we're going to see a lot of names come off the board in the second. And right now, my latest mock that I've done, I had the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Ravens all taking a running back in the second round. I think even I'm underestimating how many teams are probably going to be pushing for that position once we get past that first round.
Yeah, I agree. And especially since we've kind of seen the rise in kind of the two-headed monster in the backfield, I do think a lot of teams with elite running backs are going to be looking to take a guy, kind of save the mileage on the legs, kind of bring in somebody who does something different. So if you have a Derrick Henry, if you sign Derrick Henry, maybe you want to draft a guy who's more of a third down pass catcher, do things C down. If you bring in Tolly Pollard, maybe you want to, draft like a Braylon Allen, someone who's a little bigger, who can handle the goal line work. So, I do think we'll see more running backs that people are expecting to go kind of in the day 2 area. But when we talk to when's the first running back going to be drafted, this can be the first time in a while we don't see a running back go top 40, maybe even top 50. I'm trying to think of the last time a running back didn't go in round 1 and went late round 2. Maybe 2014. I think Bishop Sankey was picked 42, 43 to the Titans. And since then we've been pretty consistently seeing running backs going in the first round, going early in the second. So yeah, I agree. It's a pretty consistent, things we see in mock drafts. No team ever wants to draft a running back, but the NFL clearly values the position more than the fans. So, yeah, I think the back end of the second will be littered with running back picks.
Yeah, and I think we'll start to see more clarity on how the NFL views this class. I think that's the big issue right now is, even for me, I look at this running back class, and it's hard to try to rank them necessarily and place an order on how I expect them to come off the board, because a lot of it's just going to come down to how these teams kind of operate in their own schemes more so than what these running backs can do specifically. So we'll start to get some clarity on who likes who and who tests well and who doesn't, and we'll start to get a more agreed upon ranking at the top. And I think that's when we'll start to see some of these guys rise up in the mocks, especially in some of the bigger names like Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, stuff like that, where those bigger mocks will start to have these guys in their drafts, and then more people will start to incorporate them as well. But right now, it just seems like every time around this time of year in the draft season, you look at where Bijan Robinson was last year. This was a guy that was projected to go 16 at the earliest, I think, is what I saw on Grinding the Mocks, where he was in that 16 to 30 range for where he was at in February. Jahmyr Gibbs was second round guy in a lot of people's mocks. So a lot of these guys will continue to rise up the board, and we'll start to see earlier names talked about. But even when the mock drafts are finished and Roger Goodell walks out on stage for the first time, we are going to start to see running backs go off the board a lot quicker than a lot of people projected, and probably a lot more than people are projecting in that second and third round range.
Yeah, I agree. But something that's a bit interesting is how many running backs in this class would you be comfortable, starting week one as a 3-down back, saying this backfield is yours. Go take, 70-80% of the snaps. I mean, to me, it's not many, but I'm interested if you have any guys that you think could have, the 3-down potential.
As far as 3-down potential, I don't have a lot of confidence in most of this class, unfortunately. But I think especially like when it comes to the NFL and rookie running backs, that's never going to be the case for a lot of guys. I mean, we saw Bijan Robinson get completely outsnapped by Tyler Algier this year when he was like the 8th pick. So no one's going to be drafted with the expectation that they're coming in and being the bell cow of the team. But if you were asking me someone that I trust to be lead back, there's a couple guys that I think I could go with. I think Ray Davis and Blake Corum are guys that, if you're giving them 10 to 14 carries in that first week, I would feel okay with that, and I'd feel pretty confident that they could capitalize on those opportunities. If Jonathan Brooks was healthy, he's probably the best case of someone that I would trust to be a 3-down back, but unfortunately with the ACL injury and probably needing a year to kind of regain all of that explosion that he showcased, there's probably not any great options. And it might honestly be like a Will Shipley. That's my best bet for, like, this is someone that I trust to take everything in on week one and be my bell cow. But it's really a lot of these guys are going to have to be in a rotation at the NFL level, even as they start to develop and progress. And I'm sure there will be someone who kind of outperforms expectations and maybe is a every down back, maybe like someone like a Kamani Vidal, who I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that 100% correctly, but who has the pass blocking already, and that's one of the biggest question marks for rookie running backs. So, he has the bruising back mentality, and he's a great pass blocker. So maybe someone like him could potentially come in and perform and produce right away. But as far as immediate confidence in 3-down back, yeah, there isn't anyone that has like that Bijan or Breece Hall type capability in this class.
Yeah, and I think we might see that reflected in the free agents. If, you're a team who needs to revitalize the running attack, like the Chargers, are you just going to go sign a guy rather than kind of hoping that you can, like, build and patchwork a running back room out of, the draft and low-value free agents? I'm not sure. Like, you look at the Panthers, they kind of brought in Miles Sanders, he was on the Eagles. Everybody kind of expected him to regress, and he regressed a lot. I think we might see that these running backs may get a little bit more money than people are expecting just because of the lack of bell cow potential in this class. So these guys at the top maybe make an extra $1-2 million, get that extra year that people are not expecting out of this free agency.
Yeah, so before we end up this and wrap up this episode, I guess, I'm curious on your thoughts for some of the running backs that looked pretty good this year, but maybe aren't necessarily viewed as starters for their current teams, or maybe aren't viewed as long-term pieces, even if they are the starter right now. Guys like Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, and Gus Edwards, who they did well this year. There's nothing that you can really criticize in terms of their overall body of performance, but maybe aren't viewed by most as a long-term starting option. What type of market do you expect for those guys where maybe they could be a spot starter or someone that you sign so that you aren't rushing the position of running back in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, those guys kind of entered a tandem or entered kind of a shared backfield, either outplayed or due to injuries, got the starting position. And ideally in a better world, they are giving lead back opportunities because they kind of proved that they could handle it. But I just don't think that the market's going to be strong for those guys. Because like you said, a lot of these guys are kind of incomplete running backs in the draft. And I feel like those jobs are just going to get replaced. There's only so many there's only so much room for running backs on each 53-man roster, and those spots go by quick. So those guys, we've seen it all the time. A guy comes in, he's kind of, really good, and then just doesn't, end up materializing. Like, look at James Robinson. So hopefully these guys end up somewhere where they get a decent amount of snaps, but I'm just not confident in it.
Yeah, and we'll start to reveal our rankings and talk about these prospects more in depth we just wanted to do more of an off-season primer type of discussion around the position. We'll start to talk more meat on the bones for these names and start to discuss how we value each guy and maybe some sleepers we have later down the line. But until then, we hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm Michael Rochman, that's Bailey Kumar, and this is the 2 Minute Drill Podcast. Peace.